What's up, movie lovers? We're the Hilsmaniacs, and today we're going to be comparing two movies to determine which one we think is better. The two movies in question are Venom and its sequel that recently released, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So first, let's talk about the first Venom movie. I kind of enjoyed it, and honestly, I like how they managed to make it its own thing without including Spider-Man, because if you know Venom from the comics, he's like a Spider-Man villain, so he's always associated with Spider-Man. I think there were some maybe like individual Venom comics where he was kind of away from Spider-Man, but I like that they managed to do that in this movie, and they made it make sense to how Eddie Brock gets the Venom symbiote and all that stuff. Him being a reporter and everything else. Well, I mean, he goes to the Life Foundation to investigate what's going on there, and ends up getting hit by the Venom symbiote, and then they bond together and everything else. I also like the dynamic, of them two. Like, they're both like losers and stuff, like who are just completely like nobodies. Basically, Venom even says he's a nobody on his planet and all that stuff. And then this is just their struggle to bond with one another, throughout it, not just being friends, but being like linked together. They kind of struggle with that. It's similar to like, Bruce Banner and the Hulk. That's kind of what I kind of liked about it the most.
Two separate entities sharing one body.
And the fact that like Venom is able to talk, like Hulk doesn't really talk unless Bruce is kind of like also talking. But like Venom, it took a while for like Hulk to do that, but like Venom like already was his own entity, so he just like talks himself. I thought it was just a really fun movie to see. It wasn't that as big as like the Avengers and stuff like that for the first Venom movie, but it was still. I think they found a way to make it click without having to include Spider-Man, like I said.
I agree. I really liked the first one. Just because of what it was able to do, and it was kind of different than the stuff we've seen before. We had these kind of, solo superhero movies, before, but to take a character like Venom and kind of make it its own thing when it was mostly associated with Spider-Man.
Right.
And I think Sony did a good job at doing that. And then, everybody was wondering, would there ever be a Spider-Man reference in this, in Venom? And I personally didn't think they needed it.
Yeah, it didn't.
I think right. Venom did a really great job as a standalone film for Sony, with the Sony Spider-Man stuff. But keeping it away from Spider-Man, at least for the first one, I think they did a really good job.
And I think my favorite scene probably from that movie is the motorcycle chase.
Yeah.
Where like Venom helps Eddie escape the pursuers that are after him, and he's just like to around the corner. Venom's arm comes out like a string. Kind of like a spider web. And things like that. Kind of keeping the similarities with Spider-Man, but not really. And just turns around. And then when Eddie like crashes the motorcycle. He breaks a bunch of bones, and you just see them reconnect because Venom just fixes him and all this stuff. He's basically indestructible with Venom in his body.
That's a good point, too. It's that, Eddie, in a way, needs Venom, but Venom also needs Eddie, and we talked about the kind of symbiotic relationship that they have.
Right.
And it's like they're made for each other, basically, and without Venom, yes, Eddie can still live, because he was doing it before without Venom, but they can't fight these foes that are now coming after them by themselves, and Venom, and we see a lot more of this in the second one, there's certain like properties in the human body that Venom needs to be able to survive on, that he can connect with, and he can't do that with everybody, at least not for long periods of time. So for him to find that with Eddie, I think was a great way of kind of showing that.
I mean, I'm not trying to nitpick, but like the one thing I did find weird about the movie is that it was kind of convenient that
like
what are the odds of that. It's like, it's what I mean. Is it like a certain type of person that they can bond? We've seen they can bond with animals too. Like Venom did that in the movie. He was trying to get back to Eddie or whatever, so he was in a dog and all this stuff. Yeah. So it's like they can bond with certain things, just not for a long period of time. But why are they able to bond with humans at all? I don't think this is a question that was answered. I don't think it needs to be answered in the first movie either. Like, that's something you can explore down the road. But all in all, for this movie, I thought it was just like a fun movie. It kind of reminded me.
As its own thing.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like a comedy too, but it's also kind of almost like a horror movie in a way. Just because, like, it's like an alien is now inside you, and turns you into this big sludge monster with teeth.
Bursting out of your chest.
Yeah, but I thought, like, the dynamic between Eddie and Venom kind of reminds me, I don't know why, it just reminds me of, like, Deadpool. Just the way he talks and everything else. Like, Venom is just hilarious, and Eddie's more, like, grounded and serious.
Oh, and even the banter between the two.
And it's funny.
The funny part is that it's...
both Tom Hardy.
Yeah, it's Tom Hardy arguing with himself.
Well, it's just like Mark Ruffalo with the Hulk.
Yeah, I know, but it's just funny to hear because he had to record both, so it was just kind of, he's arguing with himself basically, and I do that. So.
We all do that.
Yeah. But Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the sequel to Venom. I personally like the first one better. But I'm not saying that this wasn't a good movie. I just had more fun with the first one, I think. He ends up fighting Cletus Cassidy in Carnage, and there's just some other random chick who has mutated powers.
Who somehow has power. Yeah, that's not really explained either.
They don't really explain where that comes from. I mean, unless it's like trying to introduce like mutants, but at the same time,
that would not be in the MCU. Yeah, technically.
So I don't know what's going on with that.
I don't know if they explained why she got powers, but I thought this movie was kind of. I mean, I felt almost like it was the same as the first movie. Like, it's a symbiote in Venom, battling another symbiote. Like, I kind of want to see. It's almost cliche at this point. Like, a superhero is always going to battle a villain that's similar to him. Tony Stark battled another Iron Man type character, with Obadiah, or even another billionaire type person with Justin Hammer and everything else, or Thor battles Loki, another god, or the Hulk battles Abomination, etc. So, like, Venom battling other symbiotes. I thought it was the same, but it wasn't. I'm kind of indifferent about it. It just felt like a continuation of Venom, really.
True.
I think it was like the end credits of the first Venom movie, where it showed him going to the prison to talk to Cletus Cassidy and all this stuff. And then you see that throughout this movie that he's been going there, and Cletus is like obsessed with him, telling him his story and everything, which you kind of see in real life serial killers, I guess, too. Like, they latch on to somebody, like, I only want to speak to this person. And we see that in TV shows all the time.
Sure.
I did like that aspect of it, as well as, like, I just thought Woody Harrelson did a really good job playing the insane person of Cletus Cassidy, and just like mumbling to himself. He sounded like the Joker, and even Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker and everything. He just kind of saying poetry and everything else. I thought that was just a really, like, that might be like the best performance I haven't seen too much with Woody Harrelson in it, honestly, but I think this was his best performance that I've seen. And even like Tom Hardy also, just playing both roles again as Venom and Eddie Brock, I thought he did a really good job of, like, arguing with himself, like we said, and just playing his character. They both played their characters really well, and I thought it really worked. And I definitely feel like Cletus Cassidy was a better villain than guy who I can't remember from the first movie.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I can't remember his name.
I know his actor name, but I don't remember.
Yeah. So I guess if that tells you something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
If you take out the part with Cletus' girlfriend, they would basically. I mean, yes, they kind of needed it for the main plot. Like, now Cletus is arguing with.
I did like that as well.
Carnage is trying to kill her because her screams are, real loud and affect him as a symbiote, and him and Venom. But they don't really affect Cletus, but he can't have both, so then they're kind of arguing.
I like that dynamic
ends up playing
too.
a main part in the movie, which I guess is why they incorporated her in this thing to begin with. But at the same time, she was kind of pointless. Other than that, I guess, and that random cop that just somehow gets powers by the end.
He got powers in the comics, I guess.
Yeah, but they didn't even explain how.
I know. He just has powers.
Glow blue. Yes. But other than those two, I mean, I think it was a really fun movie, and I love the banter between Eddie and Venom, and like I mentioned earlier, where we talk about kind of just seeing Venom having to live in other people. We do see that a lot in this movie because him and Eddie kind of have a falling out.
That was that was one of my favorite parts.
It leaves Eddie's body and goes to other people, but these people keep dying because their bodies can't sustain Venom like Eddie's could.
They both realize they need each other and everything. Basically. Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts because it was like we got to see Venom sort of out of his element. Yeah. He went to like a party and all this other stuff. He just kept latching on to people and then eventually realized like he needed Eddie to survive and Eddie needs him because Carnage is going to come after Eddie, and everything else. That was like one of my favorite parts of the whole thing was seeing what would happen if like if Venom like left Eddie. That'd be the same thing as like if the Hulk just somehow got separated from Bruce Banner. Like now he's just the Hulk. You know what I mean? So like you get that weird. They realize they both need each other, even though they don't want to be with each other. Like they were both arguing.
Symbiotic relationship.
Because Venom thinks they need to eat everybody, or go after humans. Yeah, or go after humans. But Eddie obviously doesn't think they need to do that. He's kind of trying to keep Venom contained, but Venom is this like monster that wants to go after everybody and eat everything. So they kind of have that. Diversity there.
He gives them chickens.
Yeah, I would have eaten the chicken.
Yeah.
And my other favorite, I'd say it's probably my favorite scene from the whole movie, barring the end credits scene, obviously, was the fight in the church that they had, where Venom and Carnage are both fighting each other, but the bell in the church tower keeps ringing, so like they both lose their symbiotes for brief moments.
So it's basically Eddie and Cletus fighting.
Yeah, and then the symbiotes, the bell stops so they can come, because of the loud sounds, they lose, the symbiotes don't like that, so they go back inside. So then it's just two guys punching each other and everything, and then they turn back into the symbiotes again, or they're falling through from the roof. And then the bell rings and they lose so they had to like. I thought that was pretty cool to show the human side of their fighting and what happens when they would both lose the symbiote at the same time. So it wasn't just like, oh, Eddie has a weakness where he loses his symbiote from this, but Carnage doesn't. It showed the similarities between both of them. And I thought this was really just a really fun scene.
But they also played off of the symbiotic relationship that Eddie and Venom have.
Yeah, they just continued it.
And because Venom or Eddie even mentions to Venom that Carnage and Cletus aren't symbiotic like they are, which is what gives Venom that kind of push. He's kind of terrified of Carnage at first, but then once he realizes that he has Eddie on his side, so now
they can win because it's both their minds
because
together.
they're working together. And I think that was, again, the main point of this whole, like, Carnage and Cletus not being together thing, that then played into the main climax of the movie where Venom was then able to realize that, he needs Eddie and Eddie needs him, and they're able to work together to defeat Carnage and Cletus, both of whom end up getting eaten by Venom. So
there you go. So if I had to pick which one I think was better, I'm going with actually Venom Venom versus Carnage, or Venom Let There Be Carnage, just because I felt like it did a lot more. Like the first movie kind of was the setup sort of, and then this one was like they did more with the dynamic between Eddie and Venom. We kind of got to see what it would be like when they separate from each other. But then they also it's kind of like Spider-Man 2 when Peter didn't want to be Spider-Man anymore, so he gave up the suit in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and he lost his powers and everything else. But then you kind of see, like, he needs it. It was the same thing here. That's what it felt like to me. It was like, Eddie doesn't want to be this kind of person anymore. And Venom is like, we need to go out and kill everybody and be reckless and use our powers and all this other stuff. And he didn't want to do that, so he gave it up. So I kind of like that they did that. And just there was more fighting and more action in this and everything else. And we got to see what it looks like if Venom was basically just a rage monster, which is what Carnage was. A piece of Venom on a really bad person. If Venom had just gone out and actually done that himself, it would have been even like, you kind of see how dangerous the symbiotes really can be just by looking at Carnage. And I also thought Carnage was a lot better of a villain than the one we saw in the first one. Because he, like, almost maybe halfway through the movie, Cletus becomes Carnage. So you get to see more of what he does as Carnage. Then at the end of the last one, I think he became...
Well, and not just that. I mean, you look at Carnage, you look at the one from the first one, he was an actual symbiote that came down with Venom from their planet.
Yeah, this one was...
This one was basically just because Cletus bit Eddie on the hand and got some of his blood and then swallowed it. Now Cletus has this Venom, symbiote inside him, basically, which then binds to his bloodstream and creates Carnage. So Carnage really wasn't a symbiote that came with Venom. He was created because of Venom, and so that's probably why they couldn't have that kind of symbiotic relationship, because now he's just he basically is Cletus Cassidy just as a symbiote, rather than a symbiote working with the person.
He
basically is the person, or he's trying to be the person, taking his evil thoughts from his head, and
I also just thought for me too, I also just thought it was like the way that they, I guess the animation and everything else, like on Venom and Carnage when they were fighting and everything else, just looked really cool. Like the way they basically have like tentacles and they're just ink splotches and all this other stuff just flying around as they punch each other. I thought that was really cool to see that kind of a fight, because you don't see that often in these superhero movies. It's just like two normal people basically duking it out and everything else. So that was kind of, I kind of liked that aspect of it as well. So I think Venom, Let There Be Carnage was the better one. What did you think?
Well, first off, other than the end credit scene and the amazing scene with Venom controlling Mrs. Chen,
that was kind of creepy.
That I did like Venom Let There Be Carnage, but I still have to go with the first one just because I like what they did with it. I like the concept and how they kind of took this character who's normally a villain in Spider-Man comics and made him kind of a hero of his own. I mean, yeah, there are Venom comics, I'm sure. I haven't read any, but I'm sure there are where he is a hero, and that's probably where they got the source material from. But this movie was just, and like you said, it wasn't just two people fighting each other. It wasn't Tony Stark versus Obadiah Stane, or Thor and Loki, or Captain America and Red Skull. This was two alien creatures that weren't of this world fighting each other for the first time, and us really learning as the audience, how do you beat this thing? Because we want to root for Venom, but at the same time, it's like Venom's also kind of a scumbag in the first one, and all he wants to do is just come destroy the planet just like the rest of them. But then he ends up, with Eddie, and they end up being friends, kind of. But I like that whole concept, and it was kind of this like inner demons type of thing, like literally inner demons. You're fighting with your inner demons, and Eddie had to kind of face these different things in life because of Venom, and that he probably wouldn't have actually fought. And I just like the way that they did this, and I think they did a great job with the first one. And then Let There Be Carnage was also good, but the first one just had that kind of impact where like you also wanted to learn about Venom. Like you didn't really care about Eddie as much because you get a lot of his backstory. as they're going through the thing, like the stuff that he's been through and this and that. But you don't learn a lot about Venom until, he really takes over Eddie and tells Eddie about his planet and his species and things like that. So I really liked it as a standalone film. I liked the first one better. And there was no Spider-Man. There's nothing wrong with Spider-Man, but I think when you're doing something like this, it is okay to leave out Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And they proved that with this first one. You don't always have to take a secondary character and have them be a secondary character. You can make them the main character in a movie, and that's what they ended up doing with this first Venom movie. So I really like the first one better than the second one, but they're both really good movies in my opinion.
Alright, so let us know what you guys thought down in the comment section. Which Venom movie did you like more? Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And also, be sure to check out the week leading up to Halloween. We will be having what we call Hallow-Week. We'll have an entire week full of Halloween-related videos on our channel, so check that out if you're a fan of that kind of thing. Like reviewing horror movies or whatever. We played some games last year, so stay tuned for that as well if you're a fan of that kind of thing. And thank you for watching, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Subscribe.